वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम कैंटरबरी टेल्स की लाइंस 331 से 387 तक डिस्कस करेंगे। अगर आपको कोई पहले के वीडियो में डाउट है तो आप कमेंट्स में हमसे पूछ सकते हैं। लाइंस 331 to 360। The lawyer is accompanied by his friend Franklin, a prosperous country gentleman. Prominent in his country, he is a generous, extroverted man, sanguine, the text says, who like good food and drink and sharing them with others. Somewhat like Saint Julian, the patron saint of hospitality. A Franklin was in his company, white was his beard, as in the daisy of his complexion he was sanguine, well loved he, by the morrow, a sop and wine to live in, and delight was ever his wont, for he was Epicurus' own son, that held opinion that plain delight was very felicity perfect, a householder, and that a great was he. Saint Julian he was in his country, that is patron saint of hospitality. His bread, his ale, was always after one, that is equally good. A better envied man was never none. Without baked meat was never his house of fish and flesh, and that so plenteous. It snowed in his house of meat and drink, of all dainties that men could bethink. After the sun-dry season of the year, so changed he his meat and his supper. Full many a fat partridge had he in view, and many a beam and many a loose in stew. Who was his cook? But if his sauce were poignant and sharp and red, all his gear, his table dormant, in his hall away stood ready, covered all the long day. At sessions there was he lord and sire. Full oftentime he was knight of the shire, and lace and a gypsy all of silk hung at his girdle, white as a morning milk. A sheriff had he been, and a counter that is auditor or accountant was nowhere such a worthy vavasor, that is tenant of the king, one who held his land in fealty. There was a Franklin in his company. The Franklin's beard was white like a daisy, and he had a ruddy complexion. He was very fond of taking a sop of wine in the morning. It was always his practice to live a life of pleasure, because he was a great follower of the philosophy of Epicurus, who used to recommend a life of luxury and who held the theory that complete pleasure was truly the source of happiness. He was a source holder, and he kept a grand house. He was as hospitable as Saint Julian himself. The bread and the ale in his house were always uniformly good. A man with a better wine cellar did not exist. His house was never without meat pie. There was such a plenty of fish and meat in his house that one would think that food and drink and all conceivable delicious eatables reigned there. He varied his meat and his meals according to the changing seasons of the year. He had a large number of fat partridges in the basket in his house, and he cultivated plenty of fish of different kinds in his pond. His cook would have come to grief if he could not make available sauces pungent and sharp, and if he did not keep cups and plates ready for the table. The dinner table in his house was fixed to the floor of the hall, and was thus always ready for use throughout the day. At court sessions he was a lord and a benefactor, and often he was the representative of his country in parliament. A dagger and a silk bag hung at his girdle, which was white in color like morning milk. He had been a sheriff and an auditor. There was nowhere such a worthy servant of the king. Lines 361 to 378. Somewhat lower in the social scale is a bevy of skilled tradesmen, most of them connected with the fabric trades and belonging to a guild, a fraternity. Their prosperity shows in their clothes and their accoutrements, and the fact that they have brought their own cook, perhaps to replace the skills of the ambitious wives they have left at home. A haberdasher and a carpenter. Haberdasher is a seller of small goods, a weaver, a dyer, and a tapicer, and they were clothed all in one livery of a solemn and a great fraternity. Solemn is distinguished, full fresh, and new their gears epicked was, that is, their clothes were trimmed, their knives were shaped, not with brass, but all with silver wrought full, clean, and well their girdles and their pouches every deal well seemed each of them a fair burgess, that is citizen, to sit in the guild hall on the dais, that is dais was reserved for the mayor and older men, each each of for the wisdom that he can was shapely for to be an elder man, for chattels had he enough in rent, and eke their wives would it well assent, and else certainly there was to blame. It is full fair to be eclipsed and madam, and go to vigils all before, and have a mantle royally before. A harbour dasher, a carpenter, a weaver, a dyer, and a tapestry maker were with us also. They were all clothed in one kind of livery prescribed by a distinguished and great organization. The clothes of all these persons were fresh and newly trimmed. Their knives were mounted not with brass but with silver, which had been rubbed perfectly clean. Their girdles and their pouches accorded well with these knives. Each of them seemed a sufficiently good citizen to sit in a guild hall on the dais. Each of them, by virtues of the knowledge he had, was fit to be an elder man. They had enough property and income, and their wives would also have admitted this fact, because otherwise they would certainly have been at fault. It is indeed pleasant to be addressed as Madam, to head the ceremonial processions on festive occasions, and to have their cloaks carried by servants in the manner of queens. Lines 379 to 387. They have a great chef with a gorge-raising affliction. A cook they had with them for the nuns, to boil the chickens and the marrow bones, and powder merchant tart and galingale. Well could he know a draught of London ale. He could roast and seethe and broil and fry. More Mertreuse and well bake a pie. Mertreuse is a kind of stew, but great harm was it, as it taught me that on his shin and normal had he, for blank manager that made he was his best, that is spiced chicken. They had a cook with them for the occasion, that is to accompany them on the journey, in order to boil the chickens with the marrow bones and to prepare sharp tasting spices and flavors. This cook could well appreciate a drink of the famous London ale. He could roast and boil and broil and fry, make a stew and properly bake a pie. But it was a great pity, as I thought, that on the lower part of his leg he had an ulcer. As for spiced chicken, he was such an expert in preparing that he could equal the performance of the best of cooks. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं, और अगर कोई सजेशंस है तो वो भी आप हमें कमेंट के थ्रू बता सकते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। टिल देन कीप वॉचिंग एंड कीप सपोर्टिंग द सोलफुल डायरी। थैंक यू।